Picture this. It's a warm evening in Los Angeles, somewhere in the mid-1960s, and the air smells like fried rice and soy sauce. The restaurant is packed. Booths full of families, couples leaning over candlelit tables, waitresses weaving between chairs with trays balanced on their fingertips. The hum of conversation fills every corner of the room, chopsticks clicking against ceramic bowls, glasses being refilled, laughter bouncing off the walls. It's the kind of night where nothing extraordinary is supposed to happen. Just people eating their dinner, living their ordinary lives, completely unaware that in a matter of minutes, they are about to witness something that none of them would ever forget for the rest of their lives. Because sitting in one of those booths, quietly enjoying his meal, is a man who doesn't look like much at first glance. He's lean, almost slender by the standards of the room. His frame is compact, his shoulders not particularly wide, his presence unassuming enough that you could walk right past him and never give him a second thought. He's wearing a simple shirt, his dark hair swept back, his eyes calm and sharp all at the same time, the kind of eyes that seem to be taking in everything without appearing to focus on anything at all. His name is Bruce Lee, and at this point in his life, while he is already a man of extraordinary discipline and skill, the wider world still doesn't fully know who he is. He is not yet the global icon. He is not yet the legend that hundreds of millions of people will one day speak of in reverent, almost disbelieving tones. He is just a young martial artist sitting in a restaurant, eating his food, minding his own business in the way that truly dangerous men often do, quietly, patiently, without any need to announce themselves to the room. But across that restaurant, someone else has noticed him, and this someone else is impossible not to notice. He is a mountain of a man, a professional wrestler. 250 pounds of muscle and arrogance packed into a body that has spent years being paid to dominate other men inside a ring. He is the kind of man who walks into rooms and immediately recalculates the social hierarchy based on sheer physical mass alone. He is used to being the biggest, the loudest, the most intimidating presence in any space he enters, and tonight is no different. He spots Bruce Lee from across the restaurant, and something about the sight of this small, quietly composed man eating his dinner irritates him in a way he can't quite explain. Maybe it's the stillness. Maybe it's the fact that Bruce isn't performing for anyone, isn't trying to be seen, isn't doing any of the things that men who want to be taken seriously usually do in public spaces. Whatever the reason, the wrestler pushes back from his table, cracks his knuckles, and starts making his way across the restaurant floor. The other diners begin to notice. Conversations drop to murmurs. Forks pause mid-air. Heads turn slowly, the way they do when people sense that something is shifting in the atmosphere of a room. That particular electric tension that precedes confrontation, the kind your body recognizes before your brain has caught up. The wrestler reaches Bruce's table and stands there, filling up the space like a wall, arms crossed, jaw set, looking down at this lean young man who hasn't even looked up from his food yet. And then he says it, loud enough for the whole restaurant to hear, loud enough that the words land like a hand slamming down on a table. "You're too small to fight." He says it with a grin, the kind of grin that men wear when they think they've already won before anything has even started. He says it like it's a fact, like it's obvious, like the mere difference in their sizes is all the argument anyone could ever need. He says it because he expects one of two reactions, either fear, which would entertain him, or anger, which would justify him. What he does not expect is what he actually gets. Bruce Lee sets down his chopsticks, very slowly, very deliberately. He looks up at the wrestler for the first time, and his expression hasn't changed at all. There is no fear in his eyes. There is no anger either. There is just that same calm, focused, almost unbothered quality that had been there the whole time. The stillness of a man who has nothing to prove and everything to give if the moment demands it. The restaurant holds its breath. Every single person in that building can feel it. That shift, that narrowing of the world down to two men and the space between them. And then Bruce Lee smiles. Not a nervous smile, not an aggressive smile, but the quiet, almost sad smile of a man who has been in this moment 1,000 times before, in training halls and back alleys and open spaces, the smile of someone who already knows exactly how this ends. He rises from his seat. And what happens in the next 5 seconds changes everything, for the wrestler, for everyone watching, and for the story of what it truly means to be a fighter. 5 seconds. That is all it takes. In the context of a human life, 5 seconds is nothing. It is the time it takes to tie a shoelace, to pour a glass of water, to blink 3 times and draw a breath. But in the context of a confrontation between two human beings, 5 seconds can contain an entire universe of information. 5 seconds is long enough for a trained eye to read every muscle in your opponent's body. 5 seconds is long enough for years of drilling and repetition to take over completely from conscious thought. 5 seconds is long enough for a man who has trained every single day since the age of 13. A man who has devoted his entire existence to the study of the human body in motion, to the science of force and leverage and timing and speed, to absolutely, completely, and irrevocably dismantle the confidence of a 250-pound professional wrestler without breaking a sweat. Bruce Lee does not wind up. He does not telegraph. He does not posture or perform. He simply moves, and the movement is so fast, so precise, so shockingly efficient that the wrestler barely has time to register what is happening before it is already over. What Bruce demonstrates in those 5 seconds is not a brawl. It is not a show of brute strength against brute strength. It is something far more unsettling than that. It is control. Absolute, surgical, devastating control. He moves inside the wrestler's guard so quickly that the larger man's size becomes not an advantage but a liability. Because big men have more body to control, more mass to redirect, more momentum to be turned against them. Bruce understands something that most people who haven't studied martial arts at his level simply cannot grasp from the outside. That size is a tool, not a guarantee. That power without precision is just noise. That the body of a 250-pound man is not a fortress. It is a physics problem. And Bruce Lee has spent his entire life solving physics problems with his hands, his feet, his hips, his timing, his breath. By the time those 5 seconds are over, the wrestler is in a position he did not choose, his body having been redirected and controlled by a man 60 to 70 pounds lighter than him, and the expression on his face has undergone a complete and total transformation. The grin is gone. In its place is something rawer and more honest. The wide-eyed, almost childlike shock of a man whose entire model of the world has just been quietly shattered by someone who looks like he shouldn't have been able to do it. The restaurant, which has been completely silent since Bruce stood up, remains silent for another long moment. Nobody moves. Nobody speaks. It is the silence of people who have just witnessed something that their brains are still working to process, something that violated their expectations so completely that they need an extra moment to catch up with reality. And Bruce Lee does not gloat. This is the detail that those who recount this story always come back to, because it reveals something essential about the man. He doesn't stand over the wrestler. He doesn't address the crowd. He doesn't perform for the audience that has gathered around this moment. He simply looks at the wrestler calmly, says something quiet. Some accounts recall it as something simple, almost gentle, about how size doesn't determine the outcome of a fight, and then he sits back down, picks up his chopsticks, and goes back to his meal, as if nothing happened. As if the last 5 seconds were just a minor interruption in an otherwise unremarkable evening. This is the part that people find almost harder to believe than the physical feat itself. Because most people, having just done something that extraordinary in front of an audience, would feel the pull of the moment, would want to let it land, to let the room absorb it, to receive the recognition that the situation seems to offer so freely. But Bruce Lee doesn't need it. And that complete absence of ego in the aftermath is perhaps the most powerful thing he demonstrates in that restaurant. Not just that he could do what he did, but that doing it meant no more to him than setting down a pair of chopsticks. Because here is what the wrestler didn't understand when he walked across that restaurant floor. He was looking at Bruce Lee's body and seeing something small, but he wasn't seeing what that body could do. He wasn't seeing the thousands upon thousands of hours of practice behind every movement. The wooden dummy work, the footwork drills, the 1-inch punch refinements, the constant reading and studying and experimenting that Bruce Lee treated not as training but as a way of life, a philosophy, a daily devotion. He wasn't seeing the Wing Chun foundation that Bruce had learned from the legendary Ip Man, nor the subsequent years during which Bruce had taken that foundation and completely reinvented it, building what would become his own martial art, Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fist, from the ground up, drawing on boxing, fencing, wrestling, and every other system he could get his hands on. He wasn't seeing the man who could do push-ups on 2 fingers, the man who could perform a sidekick so fast and so powerful that it sent 200-pound men sliding across training hall floors. The man who had refined his 1-inch punch to the point where he could generate enough force from virtually no distance to send grown men flying backward into chairs. He was just seeing the size of the shirt, and that was his mistake. There is a reason this story has been told and retold across decades, across continents, across cultures and languages and generations. And it is not simply because it is a satisfying story, though it certainly is that. It is because embedded within this single restaurant encounter is a truth that cuts to the heart of something most of us wrestle with at some point in our lives, in one form or another. The truth that the way the world sizes you up is almost never the most accurate measurement of what you are actually capable of. The truth that underestimation, while it can sting in the moment, is actually one of the most powerful advantages a person can have, if they know how to use it. Bruce Lee understood this better than almost anyone who has ever lived. He understood it because he had lived it from childhood. Growing up, he was not the biggest kid in the room. He was not the most physically imposing. In a world, and particularly a cultural moment in American history, that was deeply, aggressively skeptical of Asian men as physical presences, as athletes, as fighters, as people worthy of being taken seriously in arenas of strength and skill, Bruce Lee faced a version of that wrestler's dismissal not just occasionally, but constantly and systematically. Hollywood told him his face was wrong for leading roles. Fighting communities told him his frame was wrong for serious combat. A culture told him, in 100 different ways, that he was too small, too foreign, too different, too other to belong in the spaces he was trying to occupy. And his answer to every single one of those dismissals was the same. He went back to work. He trained harder. He thought more deeply. He read more widely. He questioned every assumption, including the assumptions within the martial arts traditions he had inherited, and rebuilt from first principles, asking not, what have people always done, but what actually works and why, and how can I make it work better? This is how Jeet Kune Do was born, not as a system in the traditional sense. Bruce was famously resistant to the idea of his art becoming rigid and codified, but as a philosophy of perpetual refinement, of being like water, which takes the shape of whatever container it is poured into and yet is powerful enough to carve through stone given enough time. Be like water is perhaps the most quoted thing Bruce Lee ever said, and it is quoted so often that it has started to lose some of its edge, which is unfortunate because the edge is the whole point. Water does not win through rigidity, it wins through adaptability. It finds the path of least resistance not because it is weak, but because it is intelligent. It does not waste energy fighting the shape of the world. It simply flows around and through, and eventually the world gives way. This is what Bruce Lee did with every obstacle he encountered. He flowed around it, under it, through it. The wrestler in the restaurant saw a small man eating dinner. He saw a target. He saw an opportunity to feel large in the presence of someone he had decided was smaller than him. Not just physically, but in every sense that his limited measurement system could devise. What he discovered in 5 seconds was that his measurement system was broken, that the categories he was using, big, small, strong, weak, threatening, not threatening, were not equipped to account for what was standing across the table from him. Because Bruce Lee existed outside those categories. He had spent his entire life refusing to be defined by them, refusing to let other people's limited imagination about what a body like his could do become the ceiling of what he actually did. And this is the lesson that echoes outward from that restaurant, that bounces across the decades and lands right here, right now in your life. Whatever your life looks like at this moment. The people who underestimate you are not your enemies. They are, in a very real sense, your fuel. Every time someone tells you that you're too small, too young, too old, too inexperienced, too different, too quiet, too much of whatever they've decided you're too much of, they are handing you something. They are handing you the gift of low expectations. And low expectations, in the hands of someone who refuses to accept them, are extraordinarily liberating. Because when nobody expects you to do something, you can do it without the weight of performance anxiety, without the pressure of a crowd that has already decided you'll succeed. You can simply work. You can simply prepare. You can simply show up day after day, putting in the hours that nobody sees, building the capability that nobody is tracking, becoming something that nobody around you has accounted for in their calculations. And then one day, maybe in a restaurant, maybe in a boardroom, maybe on a stage or a field or a court or a page, you set down your chopsticks and you rise, and 5 seconds later the room goes quiet, and the people who had decided you were too small are revising every assumption they ever made. Bruce Lee was 5'7" tall. He weighed between 130 and 140 pounds at his peak. He could perform feats of speed and power that trained athletes and fighters. People who had dedicated their lives to physical excellence watched with their mouths open in disbelief. He changed the way the world thought about martial arts, about Asian identity in Western culture, about what the human body was capable of when paired with an extraordinary mind and an absolutely relentless will. He did all of that as a man the world kept trying to dismiss as too small to fight. Every single time they said it, he proved them wrong. Not with words, not with arguments, with 5 seconds of undeniable, irrefutable truth. That is the legacy. That is the lesson. And the next time someone looks at you across a crowded room and decides, before you've even had a chance to show them what you are, that you're too small for whatever it is you're reaching for, remember the restaurant. Remember the wrestler's face in those 5 seconds. Remember what it looks like when the world realizes it measured the wrong thing. And then go back to your meal. You've got work to do.